right, and we are live. Let me unmute and undeafen. All right. All right, you can talk now. Wow, really? What is going on? I like how everything was working just fine a second ago, and now it's not. Say words. I can't hear you.
Oh, I was muted. Shit.
Making me look like a dumbass.
Yeah, it's like I've got no. I feel I'm so confused. Are we live? Are we streaming? Is Annie
we're
Vodka
going.
watching us? Okay.
We're going. We're live. We're
Okay,
live,
take
kid.
it.
Live, pal. All right, let me get the.
Welcome to
display set up.
ColleidoCast. This is
Yeah.
the only podcast that talks about movies.
Yeah, this
both,
is the only
both
podcast
old
that
movies
talks about movies.
and current movies.
That's it. All right, get this going here. Oh shit, was working. All right, here we go.
Are
there
we,
we go.
are
There
we
we go.
restarting? What's going on?
I fixed it. We're good. We're good.
Are we live?
We're rolling with the punches. Is what we're doing. All right. So yeah, welcome to the ColleidoCast. I am JT. This is my co-host War. This is the only show online where you can talk about anything from 80s B movies to AAA dumpster fires in most form of media. Anyway, today, as you can see in the title, we're going to be talking about Matrix 4, which that's something else. It's something else.
Yeah, The Matrix Resurrections is trash. I think we can all agree on that. Whether or not you're a fan of the Matrix movies, I think it's objectionably a bad movie. And I think as a Matrix movie, it's a bad movie. It's a bad Matrix movie, and it's a bad movie.
So, if you haven't seen any of the other Matrix movies, like for instance, my wife had not watched any of them till this one, and she actually thought there was some interesting stuff in there, and she liked it. As someone who's seen all of the other ones, though, and spoilers, I mean, they're going to be out throughout this thing. We're going to try our best, at least through the first half, not to spoil stuff, but long story short, they kind of take a lot of the foundational stuff that was set in the first couple of movies, at least, and basically just uproot that stuff and put another tree there.
Throw it out the window. They threw it out the window, which,
And
admittedly, they did have to do something with the fact that there aren't payphones anymore. Like, payphones used to exist in 1999. They do not exist in 2022. So the whole using a hardwired phone to jack out of the Matrix, that part's been scrapped. But do you just want to dive right into all the things that sucked about this movie?
I kind of want to go with some of the positive things, actually, because there are a couple of positives. One positive was the overall mystery that they were kind of weaving in the first hour there. Granted, that got totally torn off the hinges and just, like you said, thrown out the window. But what they were doing with Neo and kind of how they were explaining why he was back in the Matrix and his role in the Matrix, which does get explained pretty well later on, even though it doesn't really make much sense, like most things in this movie. I liked it. Like, you get to see kind of his day to day, and all the weird stuff he's seeing. And I can imagine in the first Matrix movie, that was much what his day to day was probably like. In fact, the other day we actually went back and rewatched the first Matrix. First of all, that movie really holds up. That's one of the best movies ever made. Like, at least in the 90s.
Absolutely.
Hands
Absolutely.
down. I freaking loved it. But if you just pay attention to like the editing and everything, and like how everything happens in the first half of that movie, it's not too dissimilar to what you see in this movie. Like, stuff will happen, and it's like you can see Neo starting to sort of see that he's stuck in a box, and then it just cuts to like a new scene.
There are a lot of parallels in the opening of Matrix Resurrection and the original Matrix, which I think a lot of that is pretty much intended. I mean, you've got the reshoot of the Trinity scene with someone who's not Trinity. You've got, you know, his boss chewing him out like he's got in the first movie.
Right, yeah.
And yeah, you know, I'll agree with you. The first act of the movie was probably my favorite. It had great humor. I mean, are we okay with just to start spoiling the beginning of this movie?
I have a spoiler tag. I'm
Okay,
trained for a reason, so because I don't know how to avoid it really.
So I really thought the beginning of the and for those who haven't seen it, the beginning of the movie is Neo is back in the Matrix, and not only is he back in the Matrix, he is a computer programmer who made a video game called The Matrix.
Most famous game in the Matrix.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, it's really, you know, it was really interesting. I'm like, what are they gonna do here? Where are they going with it? But really, it turned out that he was just back in the Matrix, and the robots used his experiences and sort of implanted them in the Matrix, which is exactly what the robots are doing in real life, because we're all in the Matrix, and so they created the movie The Matrix so that anyone who started getting an inkling, you know, you'd be like, oh, he's crazy, he saw the Matrix movie, and I thought that's where they were going with this.
They made a bad Matrix movie so that way everyone watched it and they were like, okay, this is so stupid, there's no way it's real.
I know, I liked, there was I think they were playing the White Rabbit song.
Yeah.
Alice, you know, go ask Alice when she's 10 foot tall. They were playing that song, and it was a montage, and it was all just people gushing about how much they loved the Matrix, and you know, they were all giving their theories, and I loved that because I was all into that, and everyone has their own theories. I did notice that at one point someone said that the original Matrix movie was about trans rights.
Yeah, that was like the first thing in the board meeting or whatever that they said.
Then somebody else said it was about crypto-fascism. And sure, both those things are valid, and I like it. It was cool. I'm surprised though that there wasn't somebody who didn't pop off and say that it was a metaphor for Jesus, because that was always the interpretation of the movies I thought was most likely, because Neo dies and is reborn, and at the end of Matrix Revolution, for extra spoilers, when he's dead, he's literally in a crucifix position, and he's like blind. He's got like the thing around his face. Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't bring that in. But yeah, then the whole all the stuff that they built up in the first act just sort of was deflated, because it's like, oh, you're just in the Matrix, and then they freed him from the Matrix, and there really wasn't like a mind-bending level to it, where it's like in Matrix Reloaded when Neo stopped the Sentinel in the real world, you're like, wait a minute, are they in another layer of the Matrix that's like built to like keep all the people who wake up out of the first one? And I thought they were going to do something like that, but...
So it's funny you say that, because Morpheus in this movie is literally like Neo's baby that he made in his own little Matrix simulation inside of the Matrixception. That's what I'm talking about. And then somehow he gets out of that program because he's saved by or not saved, he's woken up or whatever to what his real purpose is by real people, real operatives. It's the first part of the movie, basically. Yeah, I don't know how you square that circle. That's real freaking weird. They don't really explain how any of that works. And instead of payphones now, you have mirrors, or that's what they claim that you have to do to get out. Unless you're Neo or Trinity, you can just fly out of the Matrix, quite literally. They do that a couple of times. Yeah, pretty wild stuff. Pretty wild stuff. You're talking about how, you know, there's like different layers of the Matrix and stuff. Like, yeah, I mean, and freaking people can just make more.
If they'd explored stuff like that, it could have been cool. Like maybe even do something like Inception, where you're going into a matrix within the matrix, and then I don't know. Or,
it could have been really cool, because you got to think, if you do that, and they pretty much said so in the movie, that version of the Matrix was just Neo's life experience put in a program, basically. That's why Morpheus was kind of like what he was, and well, I guess Smith wasn't in there, but yet for some reason he was still based off of Neo's perception. I don't know.
I'll tell you what confused me is that they in the Matrix Resurrection, the original Matrix trilogy is portrayed as being a video game, and then they literally show the characters watching the movie, and I don't know how you square that circle, because it's a movie. Like, how in what way is a movie a video game? It wasn't a video game.
Yeah, because they still treated it like that was the game, like the thing that was being shown. I don't know why they just didn't
say that it was the movie, and that he was like a movie producer or something. Like, that direction in the script really confused me. It seemed again, like, why do you take these films and you're calling them now a video game? It seemed silly. I don't know why they had a Morpheus character. I guess the character Morpheus was programmed by Neo into his video game, and then the people from the real world took Neo's video game and brought it into the upper level of the Matrix. He was a modal or something they called him, or a module.
A modal, yeah. I'm not sure what that means, I'll be honest.
And then really, I guess they redo the red pill scene, which, if you rewatch the first Matrix, when Neo takes the red pill, that was like a it suppressed the input-output functions of your brain, which I guess allows the people who are searching, or the crew of the Nebuchadnezzar, they're flying through the world, and they're able to find Neo that way, and I guess it also wakes him up. I guess they did that same thing, and then they did the weird mirror stuff.
Yeah, they don't like legit tell you what the pills do. It's just more symbolic, I think, than anything. But I'm sure that there is some kind of an actual mechanic there.
And that's where we learned that in this version of the Matrix, people enter and leave the Matrix through mirrors.
Right. Which
they go through the mirror.
Do cool things with that too.
There could have been cool things, and I kind of liked part of it, especially when they're trying to escape, and they find like this little tiny mirror. It looks like it's maybe 12 by 12
on the subway train.
On the subway train, and someone says like, "Oh, we can't fit through there," and the other gentleman says, "Oh, it's a matter of perspective." And I thought, okay, they're gonna do something cool here with like camera perspective, and sort of like bending the reality of the Matrix, which is what all the movies are about. They're into the Matrix, and they bend the rules of the Matrix. So their computer, the Matrix is a computer programmer, and all of the people are generally hackers that have been freed. But no, that didn't happen. It just cut to like Neo crawling through a mirror that was suddenly big enough to surround him. So I don't know why.
Yeah, he basically just like reached his hand in and was going in further and further, and I guess from there they just did that camera cut, and okay, well, cool.
Yeah,
nice idea. I guess
that was disappointing. So the first act starts strong and then peters off. There was an action scene on a train, which is probably my favorite action scene, even though it still sucked. And that's when we're introduced to the concept of swarm mode, which instead of having individual agents that come get you, the programs just flip all of the people in the surrounding area into like zombie agents. Yeah, the best brawl fight scene that's ever been put to cinema is definitely the Kingsman. The original Kingsman, the church fight scene, where he goes through, everybody's fighting each other, everybody's going crazy, he's killing people, stabbing them. This was not anything like that.
Yeah, that was a really good scene. I agree.
In Kingsman? Yeah, and it had long cuts. You could tell what was happening. There was a continuous flow of motion. In these scenes, it's almost as bad as, I don't know if you ever watched Game of Thrones, but there was like the final season of Game of Thrones had this fight scene that was all in pitch black, and nobody could tell you couldn't tell what was happening. It would just cut to people being like eaten by skeletons, and then the next scene they're back up and they're fine, and they just have like a little scratch on them. There was no continuity in any of the fight scenes anywhere in this movie.
I didn't watch Game of Thrones, but I heard all about how bad that last season was from everybody.
Let's delve into the action, because this is a Matrix movie.
There is no
the
action.
original, exactly. There's no action. We're in the Matrix films, so we've got the fight scene on the subway, which is probably the best. All of the gunfu or the gunplay scenes,
non-existent.
Well, there was no suspense, because throughout it, all the cops, all the agents, all had like fully automatic machine guns, and they're just hosing down with like walls, just a continuous stream of lead that every single character just runs through magically, never gets hit. Everybody's got plot armor.
Yeah, that bothered me.
Which made it not exciting. In the first Matrix, Neo had to like duck behind those stone columns, and shit was blowing up, and the stones were flying, and chips and bullets. In this movie, everybody just runs through the gunfire, and it's not even like a bullet time thing where they're dodging the bullets. There is no bullet time in this movie also. Despite the fact that they call it bullet time.
Yeah, quick aside, I guess. One thing that really bugged me, because in the first, to my knowledge anyway, all the Matrix stuff before this, I don't believe they've canonically recognized bullet time. It's just people who know how to bend the code, and that's what it looks like to you. You don't know what it is.
Something in the Matrix, Neo was just moving really fast,
right.
And the agents would do that while they were dodging it, and it would show it in real time, and they would just look like they were fading in and out of existence. Bullet time was the technology by which they did the slow motion shots in the Matrix.
Right, and it kind of I don't understand why they decided to not only acknowledge it, but basically say, what's our next bullet time? What's the next thing that we can throw up in their gray matter and mess with their heads and this and that? And I thought they were going to foreshadow like some new neat trick, because I like the Matrix. I did not expect them to make a bad movie, but here we are. And seeing that foreshadowing and then never having it pay off, that sucks so much. The payoff was basically the analyst scene, and then
what if you could have had Neo become so powerful that not only can he like slow time, but somebody gets shot and then he reverses time? How cool would that be?
I mean,
like
why not?
literally taking over the entire Matrix.
That's something they could easily explore.
That would have been exciting.
Because now we don't just have the one, we have the two, because of how the movie ended.
True, and that's actually something, I got this written down here, I want to get into that later, but it's one of the few things that I haven't seen anybody mention, and I know there's a lot of complaints about, like, they're saying that Trinity is the one, because she has powers now too. No. I really don't think that's the case, and they really spell it out. Basically, Neo's powers work only when he's in the vicinity of Trinity, which sort of makes sense because she kisses him in the first one and then he like jumps back to life.
Yeah.
But the game that Neo wanted to make, when the WB executive sat him down and said, "You're making a fourth Matrix film," he was working on a game called Binary, which is 2.
Mm-hmm.
And Neo is the 1, Trinity is 3. Binary, I thought that was an interesting. That's call it symbolism. I suppose it is. I thought that was cool. That could have. I felt that could have been explored more. How what the binary means and what they can do when they're together. Which, unfortunately, in the movie, Neo doesn't have his powers, and he doesn't even get them back really.
Not really. No, he just does this a lot.
Yeah, and that goes back to the shitty action.
Yeah, I was trying.
So let's go to the next action scene, which was Neo versus Morpheus, the new Morpheus, and it's basically
it's the dojo
a reboot
scene.
of the dojo scene. Yeah. They're in another dojo and they have another fight. It's not nearly as good.
Half of this movie was basically just shot for shot
just
trying to remake stuff. Yeah.
Which I mean, again, the parallels work in a lot of ways because it is a resurrection. You got that reborn. You're going through that cycle. There's been 6 Matrix cycles already, and 6 of the ones, if you remember the architect's speech from the second movie.
So I guess this could just be another one, I suppose.
But the fight scene between Neo and Morpheus was slow. They looked old. The scoring was bad. You didn't feel like it was building to anything, and again, the slowness is probably part to the fact that Keanu Reeves is now in his 60s or some.
He's 59, I think.
59.
He's basically right there.
There wasn't even any contact in a lot of these fight scenes because Neo's bullet stopping is suddenly he just puts his hands out and he stops punches and kicks now. In sort of like weird force. It almost looks like the shielding that oh god, what's her name? The Invisible Girl from the terrible Fantastic Four movies would do. She would put that shield in front. That's basically what Neo does throughout the movie.
Yeah, and one thing I noticed, there's two things I want to bring up about just the action sequences. One, since we're already talking about it, with the hand thing, he looks like strained every time he's doing it too. Like he looks like he's literally using the Force, like it's a freaking Star Wars movie. He's like ah. And I'm like, okay, so in Matrix 1 and 2, it wasn't even like a thing when he figured out he could do. He just like, he just stopped.
Yeah, he could see the code of the Matrix, and he realized he was the one, and he began changing things. And what he would change is he would just sap all of the momentum for the bullets, because physics, the Matrix is a simulation. Physics aren't real. There's no conservation of energy. You can just make bullets stop, and that's what Neo would do.
Right.
And this one...
Maybe he's just struggling to see the code, even though he's been a programmer his whole life. His whole Matrix life, this second one. And then... oh, go ahead.
I'm just thinking through all the action scenes. Then you've got the fight scene with the Merovingi, in which...
Okay, this is what I was about to say. The effects in this movie, to me, most of them look bad. I didn't like, at least in the action sequences, I did not like any of the action sequence effects. Going back and watching that first Matrix, I don't know how in 20 years, with more funding, we've made worse looking fight scenes, but whatever. There's one scene that really stuck out to me. It was when, I don't remember if he was being shot at or, I think he was being shot at. It was when Smith shows up. And like the first thing that happens is they start, shooting at him, and he does the bullet time thing, but it's quite literally just like 4 frames of him just shifting left and right, and it looked like I could make that with $0 and a crappy camera and some editing software. Like that's it.
Sure.
That one in particular was like, wow, what did they do to this thing that used to be really cool? Like. Yeah, that stuck out to me.
When they shot at the agents in the first movie, and like you had the
it was great.
The foreshadowing when Morpheus told Neo that men have emptied entire clips at them and hit nothing but air, and then when you actually see it, and like they can't even shoot them because they move so impossibly fast, that really brings a sense of foreboding and a sense of threat from the agents. Because they're bullets, like you can't even shoot them. Like how can you? And then Agent Smith just beats the shit out of Neo for like half the movie. I don't even remember like the fight scene with Smith and Neo in this movie. Was a lot of them was beat for beat, just how the fight scene in the subway from the first Matrix. Like he even does the thing where he punches through the concrete.
Right. I remember seeing that too, and just kind of like rolling my eyes at it, because. At this point, we're like an hour and a half in or something, and I'm like, okay, you can make new stuff now if you want to.
Sure,
it's
in fact,
fine.
One of my notes I've written down here is no Agent Smith battle. Like the first movie,
not really,
that final fight scene with Neo and Agent Smith, who is the arch enemy. It's fucking epic. It's a great fight scene. There's multiple segments. Neo's like on the ground, like coughing up blood, and then he gets back up and he's like does his thing, and all the dust comes off him. And then he starts fighting back. You can see the shifts of momentum back and forth because they're so evenly matched. But Smith has all these powers. He's really not fighting fair because he's a computer program.
And why would you?
The second movie, it ramps it up where you've got Neo versus 100 Smiths, which some of that fight scene does not hold up as well.
Right.
But a lot of it's still satisfying.
Yeah.
A lot of it's still satisfying.
I think last time I saw that fight, it definitely looked like a bunch of ragdolls fighting each other, basically.
Yeah, some of the CGI is pretty terrible. But then, like, the third Matrix movie, you have literally Agent Smith and Neo are the most powerful. In fact, they're the only two beings in the Matrix at that point. I think Smith assimilated every person in the Matrix. I don't know if that's ever explained.
I think
they're
that's
like
what
flying
happened,
around in the sky. They hit each other so hard, all of the rain is immediately evaporated around them. They crash into the ground in a big giant crater. It is as over the top and epic as possible.
Right. It's
Dragon Ball Z. Fight scene. Yeah, and the fight scene. There was no fight scene with Agent Smith versus Neo. It was like a couple shitty karate scenes, which I do appreciate that they kept the karate style instead of like having Neo do all of his judo from the John Wick movies, which is how he fights there. I thought they were going to lean heavily on that, but they didn't. They kept, it was all sort of like Eastern fight scenes.
Blocks, yeah.
But no Agent Smith battle. How disappointing.
No
but yeah,
Agent
and
Smith.
then that scene there was the one with the Merovingi. I don't know if that's the same actor, but the guy who plays Merovingi, Christoph, I want to say his name is. I think he's the same guy from.
I've seen him before.
I probably should have verified this. I'm pretty sure he's the guy, the evil Nazi from Inglourious Bastards. He's a great actor, and he was and that was also the same guy who was the German from Django Unchained who buys Django and frees him. Great actor. This movie, I couldn't even understand what he was saying because the sound mixing was terrible. He was just shouting about random stuff.
He was shouting about how basically things now are like super convoluted and entertainment is garbage now and things used to be original and this and that.
Is that what he was saying?
Yeah, and that, not to get too into it right now because I'm sure we'll talk about it more later, but that kind of gets into what the meta commentary of this movie seems to be, which is
perhaps
that basically, or at least what they think audiences are saying about things, one or the other.
But I don't even know why they would have had the Merovingi in there. He's such an eloquent, well-spoken individual. The actor himself speaks like 3 or 4 languages fluently, which is why he's always in these roles that he's speaking multiple languages.
That's wild.
And that whole fight scene with the crew of whatever this crew is, I don't even know what the ship is called.
Yeah, I don't even remember what the ship's called.
Versus the Exiles. Which again was just a bunch of jumbled jump cuts, a bunch of you couldn't. There was no sense of who was winning. Are they kicking their asses? Are they getting their asses kicked? Is it like back and forth? You can't follow any of it. And I think the expanded lore of the Matrix is so poorly explained. But those were vampires that they were fighting. Are you aware of that? I
don't know how you could be.
Yeah,
because they didn't say anything about it. Like I know in 2, you see them and. They're basically vampires,
basically vampires in the Matrix universe are explained as being rogue programs that refuse to sort of abide by the Matrix rules, and that's why if they get like you can't kill them, you can only kill them with silver. And there was a terrible scene where they shot at one of the vampires, and then he's got the bullets in his teeth and he spits them out. Pretty terrible. But yeah, I don't know why that scene was even in there because it was awful. All the action. How about the dialogue being awful?
You
remember some of the terrible lines that they gave in this movie?
Not really, actually. No, not really, because most of it was just kind of drab. It was just nothing stuck out really to me.
How about
I was just along for the ride basically, and those are just the tracks. It's like, okay, this exposition's explaining that, this or whatever, and then it barely even explains whatever it is that they're trying to explain most of the time. I didn't. Nothing sticks out to me.
We rewatched the original Matrix, and there's the fight scene with Morpheus and Neo in the dojo, and the people are watching him. They're like, man, his numbers are off the charts, and they're like watching, like, you know, his body's like twitching and stuff in the chair. And then Morpheus gives that great line. He's like, do you think you know, that my being stronger or faster than you has anything to do with your muscles in this place? And, you know, it's just great writing. There was a line in The Matrix Resurrections where Neo tries to use his powers, or he's like starting to, or it might even be during the dojo scene in this movie. And someone says, Neo's lost his mojo.
Yep. I remember that.
And then like 20 minutes later, when he starts getting his powers, the other guy goes, "Mojo rising." Like, just awful, shitty dialogue. Oh God, I had a couple other examples, but just shit like that. Like no witty, just lazy writing. You know, Neo's Mojo's right. He lost his mojo. One guy calls himself a fanboy.
Oh yeah, the Neoologist.
Yeah, the Neoologist. That's the only character I remember, which is another great thing. There's no characters in this movie. There's an entire crew, and I don't know any of their names. Bugs. Bugs was one of them.
That's the only one.
And that's because her name is explicitly stated in like the first 10 seconds of the movie. They're like, "This is Bugs." Like, Bugs checking in here.
They introduce everybody, but they don't really do anything the entire movie. Even Bugs doesn't really do anything.
And that's why part of me feels like this is a setup for another trilogy, because they did introduce all these characters, including robot characters, and none of them did anything.
So that kind of brings something to mind. I was watching something earlier about this, and they basically said, like, the Matrix to us, like people our age, that was like our Star Wars, right? And then during that time.
Now this is our
more Star Wars,
trilogy.
Right? So this is our, this is the 20 years later crappy trilogy that the next generation will look back at after watching the first 3 movies and be like, hey, you know, it wasn't that bad actually. It was pretty good.
I hope that. Well, you know what? I hope that they do make more of these Matrix films, because this Matrix Resurrection was such dog shit. You got, like, there needs to be more. Otherwise, it's a complete bomb. Because really, there was no climax to the movie. But before we get into the end, Act 2. So this is after Neo is freed from the Matrix, and all the weird mindfuckery shit, where it's like, is he wrote the Matrix? Is he crazy? Like, that's just all immediately swept away.
Right. Yeah.
And this is another part that I really liked of this movie, because this is what I wanted from a Matrix sequel. This. Where they go to the new human city, and it's a collaboration between humans and robots. And it's like, okay, this is what peace looks like. Because the whole big deal of the first trilogy was that Neo essentially bartered with the machine lord. I don't know what he was. It's like the big talking face thing.
Right, yeah.
And he defeated Agent Smith, who was basically a rogue virus that was going to destroy the Matrix, and so they stopped the war. And that shit with the people and the robots working together, and then you've got the sentient programs that are like nanobot formations held together by magnets in the real world. That was really super cool.
I thought that was the one good idea that really stuck out through this whole thing. That's how they got Morpheus. You know, because he's not a real person. That's how they got him to sort of be in the real world as a character.
Which again, even the Morpheus didn't have anything to do. I suppose he did a couple things when he like went through the drains, because he's just made up of nanoparticles. But I feel like these were the ideas that Lana had left on the cutting room floor that never got made. And like, you could have done cool shit. I don't know why they wrote it as being 60 years in the future,
I'm not sure
instead of 20 years. Like, if they had just done 20 years, that would have explained why Neo was 20 years older. But then they artificially aged Naomi with makeup.
Right, yeah, it was funny. They did say, like, well, we don't know why you've barely aged at all. It doesn't make any sense to us. I'm like,
then why do it? Like, why even have it in the movie? That didn't make any sense to me.
Some stuff just doesn't need to be put out there. You know, like, or just Yeah, just go 20 years or 30.
Yeah, it could have been 20. Like, nothing would have changed. Like, you could have even had that same scene with Io, and I could imagine, because the robots are indefatigable, they could have worked with humans and built Io in 20 years.
Yeah, easily.
And this is, well, this has one of the worst scenes where, for whatever reason, Niobe orders Neo to be arrested.
Yeah, I don't remember why that was for, to be honest.
I don't remember why he was arrested, but she arrests him. They take him to his jail cell, and then he literally walks out to the balcony of his jail cell, and he's immediately rescued by the ship out there. Just, like, why even have that scene?
So the reason that he was jailed, basically, was because he's talking to Niobe, and he says, well, Trinity's still out there, and I got to save Trinity, and she's like, no, because if you do that, the robots are going to find us and destroy the whole city. That was her reasoning, and it's Neo. You got to have a little faith in him. But then she straight up says, she's like, I'd never believed this guy was the one, or whatever. And the dude literally died and came back to life like 5 times.
Sure,
like, what do you?
Sure, yeah, he could fly. He could actually fly.
Right, yeah, that was like a huge deal. Nothing else he did.
And he stopped the raid on Zion. Like, there was literally like 1,000 Sentinels in the city about to just massacre every human being, and he saved them. He saved all life on Earth, literally.
So how is it that Morpheus has a giant statue of him somewhere inside of Io, but no one knows anything about that stuff?
Someone was saying, I thought they said that Morpheus stayed to rule Zion.
Let me rephrase that. It's not that they don't know. It's I don't see how Niobe could literally be fighting Sentinels in the 3rd movie, and then 60 years later go, I didn't believe in any of that bullshit.
I don't know. And she was the one who blew up like the power plant and sort of made it possible.
Yeah.
For Neo's plan to work. This really, I think, is where they could have saved the movie, because I don't understand why there was tension between the humans and robots if the war had already ended, and now they worked together to build this city, and they started to explain that there was an energy shortage without all of the people in the Matrix, because presumably they were unplugging people from the Matrix, and then the robots didn't have any power, and there was like a 1-second scene of one of the big giant robots like carpet bombing another robot and like shooting it with lasers. I'm like, that's some cool shit.
Yeah, they were talking about.
And so I thought that you could establish that the conflict is that there's now like a civil war brewing among the machine race.
There was, because their resources were getting low. So they started
but like none of that was explained, and
it was like a 2-line thing. It was not long.
Yeah, it's like that's the plot of the movie. That should have been the whole plot.
It basically was. They just left it in the background for some reason.
I guess you just had to figure that shit out, because they were like using Neo as an energy source.
Because he's basically not a human.
yeah, I guess so.
If he, if him and Trinity are like these super batteries, right? These super copper tops.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Like they're literally just people. It's not really explained, and I think the more you try to, I could be wrong about this, I don't know, but it just seems like the more that you try to flesh out this particular story of Neo and Trinity, and the more you try to add on to it, the more like convoluted and nonsensical it seems to get. Because, and I guess it's sort of a throwback to the first movie when Neo dies briefly, and then she kisses him, he comes back to life. That sort of seems to be the main threat to the robots in this movie. You're like, okay, we got to keep them close, but not too close, because they're very important and they keep the Matrix going and flourishing. But if they're too close, they touch each other, and then the Matrix blows up. We got to build the Matrix again. It's all over the place, and that's why I say that the more you kind of expound upon this and try to add to it, the sillier it gets.
How about the scene where Trinity comes in and she's like, "Yeah, I played your video game last night. It meant so much to me." Like, how stupid! Like this mom, this like 60-year-old mom went home and played a trilogy of video games because the character looked like her. Again, why didn't they just call it the movie? Why didn't she say, "Yeah, I went and watched the movie," and it's like, wow, I loved it. Can't stop thinking about it,
Yeah, I don't know, man. Hey, we actually have someone watching. Hello.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Hello.
What were we talking about? Oh yeah. One big plot hole that I actually just thought of is okay. So, and this all this stuff has to do with the first three movies, pretty much. In the third movie, when it ends, he sacrifices himself. He makes a deal. The anomaly is destroyed, and they'll leave the people alone, and they'll just subsist off of what they've already been doing, basically. What I don't get is why the analyst, which I guess is also a robot, he's not just a program, he's a robot, basically went behind that deal and was like, screw this, we're gonna go right back to it.
That's why in the second act you needed to establish the inner conflicts of the machine race. Because really nothing makes sense.
Right, yeah.
Like,
they're the biggest mystery.
Like, if you scrap all that shit where he's arrested all the conflict with Neo and Niobe, and you spend Act 2 really looking into the machine war, and again, if you talked about how they're working the free humans, but it makes a great allegory for our reliance on fossil fuels. Like, we can't just stop using fossil fuels. We have to slowly transition, and that could have been a really interesting commentary where it's like, okay, they have to transition from human power to other sorts of power, and then you establish that the analyst or whoever is running this bootleg matrix
that's kind of what it felt like.
Is the bad guy. Yeah, I feel like that's the way it should have been structured, and then that's why you still have a bad guy who is in the Matrix and is a machine, and some sort of more focus on the Civil War and the machines. I think would have done so much for this movie instead of focusing on all this weird bullshit with like how their powers work. But that takes us to the third act. They go back into the actually, I guess the third act starts with the crew going into a machine, like a Matrix simulating program, and then there's another computer program living inside the machine that's separate from the machine itself, and then they go over their plan.
It's
the girl,
the Indian. I don't remember her name, but it's the Indian girl from the second and third movie.
Which I mean, this is kind of cool stuff where it's like with the Stymosiever, you can essentially use any processing area as like a reality, virtual reality. You plug in, so now they're plugged in inside of this machine. That was kind of cool. And then they start going over their plan, and this is when the movie, I feel, really started falling apart. When they're standing there around a well on a grassy knoll talking about their plan, and then it cuts to them doing the plan. And it just goes back and forth for essentially the final act of the movie.
The rest of the movie, yeah. And I'll be honest,
the rest of the movie is that.
I didn't pay attention, and this is on me, obviously, but I just didn't care about that. I just wanted to see a
great fight scene.
This is super shallow of me, but yeah, I just wanted to see
Well, this is the
Neo.
climax. This is what we're expecting to go in. This is the big CGI clusterfuck scene that happens in every movie. They're going to go in. It's going to be cool as shit. What did we get? It's completely nighttime. You can't see shit. Everybody is being chewed on by zombies the entire movie. Nobody even died. They have all these nameless crewmates that we don't even know any of their names. That's how insignificant they were. And then we even have some of them get killed just to show okay, shit's serious now. People are dying. So it felt like there was no tension or risk or threat at any point.
Oh man, that might go into some of the meta commentary stuff too. So
you think?
Yeah, I think so, because I think the analyst, and we can definitely talk about him. I actually liked that performance personally, even though all the logic and stuff around what he was saying was stupid, like the whole bullet time thing. But anyway, so I think that analyst kind of acts like an allegory for what the writers, or maybe Lana, wants to say about this movie and the stuff around this movie, because
you think so?
Oh yeah, absolutely, because especially if you go to the the very last scene where he's, they go and confront him. Neo and Trinity go to confront him, and he's sitting in this busted up office. One of the things he basically says is like, what you people have to offer, everyone doesn't want this. They just want comfort. They want to be told what to do. They want to, not have to worry about anything, which largely seems to be true of the real world.
Sure, and that's actually part of the first movie too, when Morpheus says most of these people aren't ready to be unplugged. Like, they don't want to let go. They prefer the fake Matrix world, and then, I mean, that's why Cypher, betrays everybody to go back, because it is better. It is better to, have your head buried in the sand, at least in this case. But yeah, I had completely forgotten about that, because
you were unplugged at that point.
Yeah, I guess so. I feel like most of the meta commentary stuff came from the Agent Smith character, namely the scene where he sits Neo down. He says, "Listen, Warner Brothers says they're gonna make another Matrix movie, and I know you already said you weren't gonna do it, but they're either gonna do it with or without you. They're gonna burn your contracts, and they're gonna make the fourth Matrix. So this is the only you may as well be a part of it and have some creative say." Which that's really, to me, the backbone of the movie, because that's
like confirmation, basically. Yeah.
That's the director saying this is what happened. They were gonna make the fourth Matrix with or without me, with or without Keanu Reeves, and we're doing it because we thought we could do better. And I mean, again, some of the ideas that were in here were really cool and were really fun, but I don't think anybody wanted to make this movie, You know
what I kind of wish, so in another timeline, I really wonder what would have come out of a movie that didn't have anything to do with these people.
Yeah, I mean you've got the Animatrix already, which is just a collection of stories told in the universe of the Matrix.
I think there's literally one scene with Neo in the Animatrix that I think about.
Doesn't he save like the kid at the end or something?
There's like one guy who gets saved, and you see like a little animation of him as he's waking up, and that's Neo, and then he's gone.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a rich world. I think the stuff with like IO and the machine conflict, those are my favorite parts of this movie, because it was the world building stuff. I think the Wachowskis did an incredible world building job throughout the three movies and the Animatrix. So there's a lot of content there. You could have made an original Matrix movie that is really exciting. I don't think Neo should have been in this. I think it almost shits on the original trilogy, because the whole point is that he sacrificed himself and he's dead.
Right.
Because he's a Christ figure in the films.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could have had even if you make the character the Neoologist, someone who's just obsessed with Neo, because really he would be like a messiah figure in the world.
What if the Neoologist knows so much about Neo that he's the new Neo, because he has an idea of how to bend things like Neo did?
Yeah, sure.
That could be interesting. That's a neat idea.
There are so many cool stories you could tell. This story was just a clunky mess. The 60 years passing and the old Niobe, get rid of her. Get rid of all that shit.
Yeah.
The only thing I liked about the final climax, it was cool when the people started jumping out the buildings.
Oh yeah, that was pretty. Suicide. Yeah, that was pretty wild. The woman just wakes up, and her husband just jumps out the window for no reason whatsoever, just freaking out. It's funny watching one bot freak out over another bot. Well, actually, that might have been a real woman. Actually, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, those were people that were plugged into the Matrix that were taken over by the swarm code. Just like how the agents would materialize in your body, and then if they got killed, it was still that person's dead body.
The swarm code didn't take over real people. They had literal bots. Like it was just NPCs basically.
Those were NPCs. I don't know. Were there even real people in that Matrix?
At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It's a small distinction.
Agent Smith. I don't even think Agent Smith needed to be in this movie. His role was minuscule.
Or he wasn't in the movie. I didn't see Agent Smith. What are you talking about?
He was Agent Smith, though. I mean, it wasn't Hugo Weaving. Stupid. Cut all of him.
I really don't like how they. And I mean, maybe they did this because they couldn't get him or whatever. But they have a new actor playing new Smith.
Well, shit. Hugo Weaving's got to be like 90 now, so I can see why they didn't want him in it.
Yeah, he's pretty old. But I really didn't like how instead of saying Mr. Anderson and having this very like matter of fact and threatening tone, he was very like buoyant and he didn't feel like Agent Smith. He certainly didn't look like Agent Smith, and he wasn't even in the police force.
He was basically like your typical dude bro character,
right?
Where he's like a douchebag, an asshole. I didn't like it. Yeah. I mean, it seemed an ill fit for the character, and then I guess Neil Patrick Harris is the main antagonist.
Funnily enough, right?
Which is also stupid. Like I don't know. I hated the movie. I hated everything about it.
I did personally, just in a vacuum, I did personally enjoy the scene where he's, Neo sees Trinity after that big fight with Smith. Like it's like in the middle of the movie, and the analyst is there, and he slows down. He reverse bullet times. Or whatever. Yeah,
that's really what it was. It was a reverse bullet time.
And he takes all this time.
I'm using bullet time to kill you.
Right.
Oh,
so it's a silly concept, but in a vacuum, it's kind of a neat scene, and he really flaunts like his villainous kind of mustache twirling mind right there. I thought it was a good scene.
Sure. It reminded me a lot of the Quicksilver scene, or Quicksilver scenes from the Matrix First Class films.
I don't think I've seen those.
You've never seen not the Matrix, X-Men First Class.
Ah, okay, yeah.
With
That's why I was confused. I'm like, what are you talking about? Yeah.
It reminded me of that a lot, which you could have done some really cool action scenes with that. Like imagine, I mean, hell, those were really the best scenes of those movies. The Quicksilver moving at blinding rate while shit's blowing up. You could have some really cool scenes with like the ultra slow-mo, I think, in the Matrix, and really sort of like showing the next step of Neo's powers, where it's not like he can just dodge bullets; he can literally, move at blinding speed. But none of that happened.
I legitimately think if they are gonna make more movies, they need to retire Neo and Trinity. I think it's time to move on to a new main character.
I mean, they've been established as the binary now. If there's going to be 2 more movies in a new trilogy, they're definitely the main parts of it.
Well, also, I'm not sure how there can be that much more conflict because they control everything, right? Like that's kind of the whole...
I mean, who knows? Like, what even happened? Like, the Matrix is still there. Is it even like I don't even know if it's the same Matrix. Like, were they in the Matrix with all of the fields of humans? Like, I had sort of spent part of the movie under the impression that this was like a separate Matrix that only Neo and Trinity were in, and that the whole thing was fake, just to keep them in this sort of la-la land and they could harness their power. Mm-hmm. I guess that's not the case. Because they go to Tokyo or some shit. I don't fucking know. It's all over the place.
And it did really bug me how they established the new way of getting out with the mirrors, but later on, Neo and Trinity are just exempt from that rule for some reason.
Yeah, they just pull the thing out of the back of their head and then they're like awake in the real world. That killed you in the first movie.
Well, I mean, they would fly and then you'd see them like cut off like from the shot, and then they would just they'd unplug. And so I'm assuming what's happening there is they're literally just yeeting themselves out of the freaking Matrix.
Is that what happened? It was
like
bizarre.
2 scenes.
I swear people got killed in the Matrix, and then they were also fine on the ship. Like the editing was so poor that I really never had a grasp of what was going on. Anyway, this movie was terribly edited, not just the action scenes.
I can't help but wonder if, like, how much of that was on purpose. Some of this feels like it was on purpose.
Yeah, after seeing that scene where they're like, yeah, we're making a Matrix movie whether you like it or not, I almost feel like they intentionally made it terrible.
It's kind of like but cutting off your thumb to spite your, what's the old saying?
Cut off your nose to spite your face.
Yeah, that one. Cut off your nose to spite your face. I don't have to use that very often. That's what it felt like.
Yeah. Yeah, the final fight scene, it was all dark, and then Neo just is like he's using like the force push to like bowl over groups of enemies. The coolest scene was when he's fighting off the helicopter, which they show in the trailer of the movie. So if you've seen the trailer of this movie, you've seen the best action scene. They blow up the helicopter. And then, did you notice how bad the final flying scene? Like they looked so obvious, like they were suspended from wires. Like you could see where like Trinity's body was pivoting on like the harness on her hips.
Right.
And it's like, oh god, that looks so bad. And they're very clearly just like dangling in a recording studio. It didn't feel natural. Like admittedly, some of the CGI scenes from the flight in the first 3 movies was bad, but
but that was CG
like
back
flight.
then, you know. I mean, that was
felt like flight.
Right. It may have been 3D, but you knew what it was conveying. It was fine, you know.
Like to see someone just very obviously hanging on suspended wires, just looked. What a shitty way to end the movie. Like
where they just fly. Well, they ended the movie.
No. Well, that's before they go the final confrontation. That's when they realize that they've got their powers.
But they literally end the movie the exact same way that the first movie ended.
Which was cool. Which I love that song by Rage Against the Machine, Wake Up. This was a female cover of it, you know, for that girl power. Now that Trinity is badass and can fly too. I thought that whole confrontation scene with the analyst was retarded. Like, why were they killing him? He's a computer program. It's not like he suffers. Like I could see why if you have a bad guy, you know, they get their comeuppance at the end. You know, that's always what happens.
I don't understand the motivations behind the machines outside of take resources to survive. That's kind of how it's always been. And now all of a sudden it's, well, I guess technically it's the same way, but it doesn't act like a machine. It doesn't even act like a program, really. Not like I would have expected. He's this mustache twirling freaking villain.
And you compare him to the architect, rightfully so, I think, who was also a construct or whatever word they gave, but he was I don't think he was a person, or he might have been the person who designed the original Matrix and then sort of uploaded his brain and became a program. But you know, he was very machine-like. You know, his speech, he spoke evenly the whole time. Everything he said, you know, you could see that it was derived from a cold, heartless logic, but it was still logic. Mm-hmm. You know, he's like, this is what we do. Like, this is why. It's like we've destroyed Zion multiple times in the past. We're getting good at it. You know, you are just a programming error. And, you know, once we reboot the Matrix, it'll happen again, blah, 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 blah. And then compared with the analyst, who really just expounds exposition, where he's like, oh, you give off so much energy, and we love all the energy, you know. They're really, you know, it didn't feel like a machine enemy, which is really what the enemies of this has always been, is the machines.
Yeah, and I think, I guess to put a cap on it, I think they took the initial story and conflict and everything, they kind of just threw it out the window. To loop back, to what we started saying, you know, it doesn't feel like the same world. Overall, 2 out of 10, dumpster fire.
Man. Yeah, I would say maybe even 3 or 4 out of 10, because, you know, it was satisfying to see what happened with the future of man and machine relations. Really, it feels like the parts that I liked were, honest to God, picked up off the cutting room floor and then slapped into this shithole of a movie because everything else was terrible.
This far and few in between, and they didn't last very long. And also, as cool as like the programs being able to use these like magnetic cubes or whatever to materialize. Like as cool as that was, it
they didn't do much with it.
Yeah, well, all you can really do with that is just it's an excuse. That's all it really is. As cool of an idea as it is, I don't really know what else you can do with that. It's like, okay, you're in the Matrix, but you're also kind of here now, and we're making strawberries out of code or something, which I don't know how you can do that, but okay.
That made sense. That made sense. I thought that was super cool. That was the kind of idea. It's like, okay, this is how they're going to rebuild the world, and they're using the Matrix to rebuild the world, and they don't eat that gruel anymore. Yeah, those are my favorite parts.
Oh no, it's cool. I just I don't know how you make strawberries without something to make strawberries with, except for binary.
Well, they were literally engineering the DNA or something. She was saying, like, they were taking data from the Matrix and then essentially like combining root amino acids in these big labs and shit. Like that's cool shit. Like that's cool sci-fi shit. Because it's at the end of the day, the Matrix is still supposed to be a sci-fi movie, right?
Yeah.
And you've got that's cool science fiction concepts. They're building DNA.
Well, that would make sense. That's where I was a little lost. Like, okay, so you got the code, but what are you doing with the code? It's what I was trying to figure out.
Maybe that's just. I don't know how well that was explained. That's just how I sort of understood it. And like, yeah, maybe if it wasn't explained better. Again, Act 2, I think, is that's where you could have saved the movie. Is in the portion that takes place in IO in the real world. And instead you have the scene where he's arrested and then he walks out to the balcony of his jail and then just walks out. Like, how awful.
Just gets picked up by the ship, right?
Like,
yeah, they just break him out.
Why even have that scene?
I don't know. I really don't know why that was necessary.
Do you ever watch Screen Rant?
I've heard of it.
Basically, it's a movie review show where this guy, he plays both characters, and he's got like a thing where every time he says, "Oh, this happens," and the guy says, "Oh, that must be a big problem," and he goes, "Actually, no, barely an inconvenience." And that's a line that he uses in every single one of his movie reviews, and I can just see him saying that. And then they arrest Neo. Well, that's going to be pretty hard for him to get out of jail. No, barely an inconvenience. You see, he just leaves via the balcony.
Yeah, because the only people that want him in there, person is Niobe. That's it. That's the only person who wants him in there. Oh man. So we're rounding out on an.
How do you fix this, JT?
How do you fix what?
How do you fix this movie? What do you change about it?
You can either just not make it. That's an option.
Delete it.
I mean, that was honestly, as time has gone on, my opinion has gotten a bit harsher of it. But right after watching it, my immediate thought was like, this shouldn't have been made. Like, I didn't feel like it was good or bad. I just didn't care about it. You know, I was like, okay, well, that happened. Great. That doesn't change the original trilogy for me at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, either that or kind of like I was talking about earlier, you know, with the whole Neologist thing, you could do something where instead of Neo and Trinity, you know, the original crew, which honestly is a movie problem nowadays. Like even Spider-Man, the new one. I'm not going to spoil it, but I mean, I think everyone knows what that movie is. Yeah, you have this high dependence on the successes, the giants of the past, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Where not only are we standing on the shoulders of giants, we're taking shovels and digging the meat out of the shoulders and trying to make new shoulders with us. Exactly. So
they dug up Neo's corpse and tried to build a movie.
Literally. The robots did that they brought him back to life from actual just being dead. They fixed his eyeballs. He was blind in the last movie. That part was cool.
Like, that was some cool body horror stuff where he's but why'd they even do that? If you're in the Matrix, you don't need eyeballs. In your physical form doesn't need eyeballs, so I don't know why they gave him back his eyeballs.
You know what would have been cooler? If he was just a brain in a vat.
That would have been cool.
That would have been way cooler, because you don't need your body. You know, if they can keep the brain alive, then that's all they need. And it also would have been... that would have, I think, raised a lot of questions for people. Like, wow, imagine being Neo right now, and then that's the actual reality, you know? Like, you can't unplug from the Matrix after that, basically.
Yeah, it's like he would have to live in the Matrix, but then because he has that limitation, you know, he could, you know, have interesting conflicts and
He'd be a human program.
He'd have his own set of struggles by being permanently bound to the Matrix that way.
I want to see that movie. That seems like a good movie.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of the shit was directly inspired by the book Neuromancer by Gibson. I don't remember the guy's first name. And it's like they basically have brains that are like read-only memory, and you plug them in, and it's like they're just waking up, and then they do their shit on their computer terminals, and then you can reboot them, and then they don't remember anything. There's a lot of cool stuff you could do with how and we've got Elon Musk talking about the Neuralink. So a lot of these concepts are more relevant than ever. Mm-hmm. But instead, they just made it a sloppy, nonsensical sci-fi story.
Basically, off the backs of characters that should have probably stayed dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have probably just either done a complete reboot or focused on another character. That's what I would have done. And that's what they probably should have done. But people are so, and this goes back to the speech the analyst was talking about. People are so, we're so nostalgia hungry. We don't.
Did he say that? Did he actually say that they want nostalgia?
I know Morpheus has a little line in the theater about it, like nothing cures anxiety like a bit of a nostalgia.
Yeah, terrible.
And, yeah, but I mean, there's definitely truth to that. I'll be the first to say it. I was really happy to see that Spider-Man movie because it really put a nice bow on the whole Spider-Man movie thing for me. I probably won't watch whatever comes after this. That's probably it for me. But
you're gonna watch every single Spider-Man movie that comes out for as long as you live. It's
got to be really interesting looking. Now, Doctor Strange, on the other hand, I'm probably going to watch that one. But, as an older guy now, having grown up with all, the Matrix and Lord of the Rings and this and that, it is kind of nice to see those old actors, or older actors, get a chance to kind of relive their glory days a little bit, It gives me good feel, I mean, but at the same time, not always, because this movie was not good. But we are rounding up on a little over an hour now. So last thoughts.
Don't go see this.
Or if you do, HBO Max free trial.
Even that, it's 2.5 hours. It's way longer than it needs to be. The movie ends. It doesn't feel like there's a climax. They almost tee up like something cool is about to happen, and then the credits roll. It doesn't feel like a whole movie. It feels like the first 2/3 of a movie that's been stretched out into some ungodly length. Mm-hmm. Like the first Hobbit movie. That's what I would compare this to. If you saw The Hobbit and you thought it was good, and you're like, oh, this makes me feel like the original Lord of the Rings trilogy did in theater. I love this. If you love that movie, this will give you the same feeling.
Except The Hobbit was definitely better than this movie.
The Hobbit was pretty bad, too.
To me, anyway. I think they really captured the sort of like fantasy book spirit in that movie with the way everything looked.
Of those three, the first one was the best, but the Hobbit trilogy goes downhill pretty fast, too, I'd say. That might be a discussion for another day.
It's just too much. Yeah, I mean, largely I kind of have the same feelings, I'll be honest. I guess that kind of wraps up the first little episode here, this thing I'm trying to do. We're going to try to do, Thursdays, I think. I don't know if it's going to be every week. We're kind of winging it at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, hopefully we can go out, we can get to see the new Kingsman movie and talk about that next week. Because that's also another sequel that's kind of, this has been years, right?
It's a prequel.
Is it a prequel?
It's about the first Kingsman.
Yeah, this should be. I'm looking forward to it. Like, this could have been a prequel. Why not? Right? Like, there's been 6 Matrixes. This could have just been like the story of the first Matrix immediately following the Second Renaissance.
In the first movie, Morpheus is explaining what the Matrix is and what's going on basically, and there's a brief line where he says, a long time ago there was this guy, he figured out how to get out of the he was the first guy who got out of the Matrix, and he basically got this ball rolling. That'd be an interesting, like, they could have made that.
That would be an interesting story.
I would. That's a prequel I'd watch, because that's a story I'm interested in.
Terminator Salvation vibes, where it's like the machine apocalypse is happening and like all the cities are burnt down to the ground, and they nuked the United Nations and stuff.
Right. Yeah. Is there anything you want to plug?
No.
Not right now.
I don't know. Follow me on Twitter. What's my Twitter? It's @WarrenWhiskey. It's war_and_whiskey. I know it's a bit awful. It doesn't flow off the tongue to read it like that. But yeah, I'm Warren Whiskey on Twitter. All I do is tweet about Donald Trump, though. So if that's your thing, follow me.
Plenty of people left on Twitter, I think, who are perfectly fine with that. I'm going to have a Twitter again soon, regrettably. Just for this show, though. I'm just going to post out streaming announcements, basically. And that'll be pretty soon, I think. This will also be in podcast form once I get around to it tomorrow. And yeah, so hopefully every Thursday, maybe a couple times a month, we'll do this. And we're just going to be talking about... it can be new movies, old movies, whatever, or games. Probably not comics. I don't read comics. Pretty trash, to be honest.
Video games, movies, I'm down. I got a lot to say about both forms of media, especially movies and video games that I love.
Well,
or hate in this case.
Both me and you recently beat Inscription, which is a game I think that could be pretty interesting to talk about.
Sure, we can talk about that. I do recommend that game. I would recommend it. I'm sure it's on sale right now with the Steam winter sale. It's definitely worth whatever they're asking for.
Totally worth it. It's not what it seems. But anyway, that's going to be it for us. Hopefully see you next week. I'll announce it again on, I guess, Twitter, because I'll go ahead and just make that tonight, I guess. And take it easy, everybody.